about to start. We'll talk about code or whatever we'll talk about today. It's about to start, so please hang tight while I check that everything is okay. Sound check, camera check, lights check. How's my hair? Oh, wait, I don't have any hair. Maybe put some pants on and I am good to go. So get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Hi, I'm Leandro Facchinetti, and let's write some code together, shall we? What we have on the menu today is the notion of grouping for the Automixer. Let's recap. What we have been working on in this series of streams that are taking the better part of the year is we are working on a library for real-time audio effects in REAPER using the JSFX language. And we are starting to use the library to develop some effects. For instance, here is the Automixer. It is an effect that helps you mix automatically a bunch of microphones that may be open in the same room. So if you're doing a roundtable, an interview, an event, that kind of thing. It can work live as well, and it can work in post-production. And what it does is reduce the crosstalk between microphones so that when one person is speaking, their voice will be also picked up by other microphones in the room, but the Automixer is going to attenuate the other microphones to make space for the microphone that is currently active. So that's what an Automixer is. And more specifically, today, we are going to improve on the notion of grouping. So this is kind of an advanced feature. I don't think that many people will use it, but I thought I would just flesh it out more thoroughly. So the notion of grouping is that you may have a group of microphones in one room, and then another group of microphones in another room. And you may want to auto-mix these two groups independently, because there is no crosstalk between them. There is no bleed between microphones across the groups. And that's what the group slider here is. This drop-down situation that we have going on is about that. So it currently works if you have a bunch of Automixers in one group and a bunch of Automixers in another group. They respect the groups accordingly. But what's not currently fleshed out, and that's what we are going to work on today, is the global parameters are not specific to groups. So we're going to look into the global parameters and how to make them group aware. And I think it would also be nice to give the waveforms and the whole display for different groups different colors, so that when you have a bunch of Automixer instances in your mixer control panel, if you use the mixer control panel user interface, the waveforms will look differently. And that's what the waveforms look like right now. We're just using white. Let's give different colors to different groups so that it looks better. That's what we're up to. Let's start with the more sophisticated, the more intricate problem of dealing with the global parameters. So first of all, global parameters are these parameters, so far 3 parameters, but I think we'll have more of them, that are synced across plugin instances. You can see that the slider is moving on the other instance as well. And then we have some sliders that are specific to this instance of the Automixer. So for instance, the priority is one of them. It only changes on this plugin, not on that one too. And the way that the global parameters work is this. When you move a slider, this block of code is going to run. and it will set some global variables. These variables are global in the sense that they are visible across plugin instances. So this plugin instance that you moved the slider on, the slider block is running, it will run this code. And it will set a global variable. Then, on the other plugin instances, you didn't move a slider. So the slider section is not going to run. But hopefully the block section is running. The block section is running on every buffer of audio, on every block of audio. And then we check, is the global variable different from what we currently have? If so, set my own version, that's the slider right here, to the global one. So that's how the syncing works. When I move a slider here, this instance is writing into a global variable, and on the block section, this instance is reading from the global variable, and it's moving as well. So it doesn't matter which slider I move, the other one is going to come with. And if you have multiple instances, like 5 of them, it works just the same. So there is a deep point to make about the thing that we are going to work on today. And that is, I made these variables global, and I made them what we call singletons. So we made these variables, there is just one of them, one global variable for all plugin instances. Generally, singletons are a bad idea. If the singleton is perhaps modeling something in the real world and there is only one of these things, then a singleton may make sense. So perhaps you would model maybe the computer on which the program is running as a singleton, because a program may only be running on one computer at a time. So maybe that would make sense to model hardware as a singleton. But typically, things are not singletons. You may think that they are not. And this is the perfect example, because we started with the notion of global parameters. Then we introduced the notion of grouping. When we started the global parameters, we thought, well, they are singletons, it makes sense. It is the simplest thing that can work, so I don't regret going about this route. But anyway, when you do a singleton, always double take, always think again, is it really a singleton? It's probably not. Because as soon as I introduced the notion of grouping, I think it would make sense to perhaps have the RMS window, the strength, the look ahead, all of those different for different groups. Perhaps even you have different groups, not because the microphones are in different rooms, but precisely because you want to have different parameters, different RMS windows. Who knows? Depends on what you're doing. But anyway, the point is, avoid singletons. If they're the simplest thing that can work and you're prototyping, then sure, go for it. But singletons are usually an anti-pattern. And that's what we are going to fix today, because we are going to take our singletons and turn them into, I guess, group variables. We'll see how that works out. Well, first things is the group, I want it to be the first slider. That's just a cosmetic change. But groups are down here because right now these parameters are global. But because now the parameters will be with respect to the group, I will put this group slider as the first one. Of course, that doesn't change much. But now all the global parameters are like the group parameters are on this section. And then we have this other section. I think that in the future, we'll probably have a honest to goodness user interface here instead of just using the default sliders. But for now, that will do. then we will need a way for the no longer globals, right? They're now group specific, they're not globals. We need a way to communicate these variables across plugin instances of the same group. And we have many groups, so I don't think it makes sense to use these global variables anymore, because we would need a bunch of them. Currently we have 3 sliders and 32 groups. So we're talking about 96 global variables. It's getting out of hand. So we are going to structure this communication in a different way. Instead of using global variables, like these variables are global, we'll use the global chunk of memory. We are going to use the global array, however you want to call that. Yeah, so in JSFX, you have this global namespace, and the variables that start with this global namespace are all global variables, but you also have gmem, that is this place in memory that all plugins get to see, and you can index into the global memory using a regular number, a regular index like that. And because we can use the index like use the global memory with an index like this, we can structure this global memory in a way that makes more sense to me. So that's what we are going to do. We currently are already doing something like that. We are doing this global data structure here. And that's for each instance, what I am calling a track. But we will have, I guess now, 2 different notions of data structures living in the global memory, which is a bit tricky. The first data structure is the parameters for the group. And we'll have, I guess, 32 of these data structures in the global memory. Then we'll start the chunk of memory that has to do with tracks or plugin instances. And then we'll have a different data structure from that point on. So we're going to break the global memory apart in a bit of a clever way. Let me see how we are doing the tracks. Okay, we have a notion of the size of this data structure, and then we have a notion of jumping steps of that size. Let's have a similar notion for groups this time. And I wonder why I have this here. Okay, I remember. Anyway, moving on. So in the init block, we currently have this, which is just preamble. We have dash. That is actually crucial, but that's something else. Let's not worry about that right now. Then let's have another data structure that I will call a group. And we will need 3 variables in this data structure, 3 fields in this data structure. Let's use the same names as the sliders, like so. Dash, dash, and dash. So these are the indices into the data structure. Once we find an instance of this data structure on the global memory, these are the indices we can use to find a particular field in the data structure. This is the size of this data structure. I need to know the size because I need to find these data structures in the global memory, so I need to jump to the right location. I also need to know where to find this group. So I have this big chunk of memory, which is the global memory. Some of it will be dedicated to this group sliders. Some of it will be dedicated to the tracks. And you need to know where to find these two sections. So I will call this first one, I'll call it groups. Perhaps a bit of a confusing name, but I will go with it for now. So GMEM just stands for global memory. That's the name that JSFX gives us to access the global memory, like this. Here I'm actually abusing kind of abusing this because I'm using it as a namespace. Then, and that's what the dot means, by the way. It means namespace. Then the group is the name of the data structure. These are the indices into the data structure, and this is the plural groups is the place in the global memory where you will find the start of the chunk where I store the group sliders. Then I need to know how many groups I have. In this case, 32. So I'll call these groups. And I don't think I have used this anywhere. Right, I have not. So now, I guess I will do it like this, where I first declare data structures that live in the global memory. There are two right now. So this is one, this is the other. So these are just data structure definitions. Now I'm going to sort of allocate space for these data structures by giving them base addresses. So I'm going to put the groups first, and I'm going to put tracks later. And I think that this name is not taken yet. It's not. But I need to be clever about the base address I use for the tracks, because I need to make enough space for all the groups. You may only be using one group. I still have to allocate a space for all of them. Perhaps I could try to be clever and save on space, but it doesn't really matter. We are talking about 32 times 3. That is 96 numbers to store. So it is better to just allocate all of this space pessimistically. And I guess I could just put 96 here. It would work, but it is a bit cleverer to do it like this. Like that. And Mage Prometheus, is that how you pronounce that? Mage? Meg? I think it's Mage. He's here saying, hi, Leandro. Hello, great to have you here. I hope you enjoyed this session. If you have questions, make sure to ask. Yeah, and this order is intentional. Because while I know ahead of time that I will have at most 32 groups, I do not know how many tracks I will have, because you may instantiate 1,000 of these Automixer plugins. So this data structure is just going to keep growing. Luckily, we only have one data structure that needs to keep growing, that we need to allocate more and more of. Luckily, we only have one of those, because it means that we can simply just allocate more space to the right. As new instances come in, I can just allocate more space to the right. If we had multiple data structures that needed to be allocated arbitrarily, it would be a bit trickier because we would need to manage memory in a smarter way. Luckily, we are not in that position. So this will do. It's not only the simplest thing, but it's probably the fastest thing we can do. Next, we have allocated this space to the groups by putting the tracks after the groups like this. But we are not using this GMEM tracks base address anywhere. So let's revisit all occurrences of GMEM and add the tracks base address. I think I got all of them, but I'm going to go over this again because it is one of those things that if I get wrong, it will be a subtle bug that will be just annoying to find. So let's go over this again with a lot of attention. And what I'm looking for is this indication in the gutter that means this line has been changed, which means I added the tracks here. But anyway, let's go over this. All right, I think I got all of them. And let's read one of these lines just to see if we can make sense of it. So we have this big space in memory, that's the gmem. Then we have the base address of the place where we are storing track information. That's what we just added. Then we sum that with the current track, the one that I want to talk about, times the size of the track data structure. So I'm taking steps of the gmem track size. So I'm indexing into the global memory in that chunk, in that step, so that I can find one instance of the gmem track data structure. So I already found the big place where I store all my tracks. Then in there, I find the specific track that I care about. Then in there, I find the specific field that I care about. And that's how every memory access looks like. Every global memory access looks like. Let's commit what we have and give this a test real quick to see if I didn't break anything by introducing this new base address, because crucially, it is no longer sitting at the base address. It's no longer sitting at 0. So I may have broken something. I don't think I did because I was careful about the changes, but still, you never know. An old programmer maximing. All problems can be solved with an extra level of indirection. True. But I try to anyway. I try to avoid abstractions until I cannot bear it any longer. I think that, and I didn't make this up, but I believe in something that many people also say, that the wrong abstraction is worse than no abstraction at all. So yeah, I am a believer in levels of indirection, but I try to avoid them as much as possible. Yeah, I think I heard this first from Sandy Metz. Great programmer. Lovely person. Sandy Metz was the person who I read this first. The wrong abstraction is worse than no abstraction, so avoid early abstractions. And yeah, levels of indirection are great. Try to avoid them. What you're doing looks good. Thanks. But let's give it a try real quick. Doesn't hurt. So the usual setup I have is I have an Automixer in 2 tracks, one of which I feed with my voice. I am going to put both of them on the MCP just for nice visuals. And then I also throw in a tone generator. So I have a sine wave always going on here, and then my voice is fighting against the sine wave like that. And everything seems to be working well. The gain that was allocated to my voice is going up and down as it should. So next, we now have this space for the group variables to be transmitted. Let's use this space. And perhaps the easiest way for me to go about this is first to have this here, because I will need to refer to these names. Then I will look for _global. That's the namespace where I used to be communicating the global variables, but now they're no longer singletons. So just look at all instances of this and see what I will do. And that will not be all. We'll also need to treat the case of what happens when you switch groups. I think that will be necessary. We'll see. Right, so first of all, we have this. That's no longer accurate. What we want is to... Hang on, this doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like the first instance of global. It is. Is it on the slider section? It's in the init section? Oh, I see. This is a bit of a hack, I must admit. It's a bit of a hack to load in the global parameters when you have just instantiated a new instance of the plugin. That's what this is about. Anyway, so we need to go into the global memory. We need to go into the place where we put our groups. We need to get our group from all the groups. So that would be group times this, which is the size of the data structure. And in there, I specifically want the RMS window length, which is this field. So same story as before, as what I showed before. I first go into the place where I store my groups. Then I go into my specific group by taking steps of gmem group size. Then I go into the specific field in the data structure. And that's what I want to do. Then for the strength and look ahead, rinse and repeat. Easy enough. Let's continue. In the end, I should only have these two occurrences of underscore global because this really is just counting tracks, so it's okay if this is a global variable. Bo is here. Hello, Bo. How was your weekend? And I guess what we want to do here is similar to what we did above. So let's go there. And here we are interested in the RMS window length in milliseconds. So let's replace that like so. Here it's strength. And here it is look ahead. I have a feeling that I should have done a global replacement of these names, but now it's late. Well, it's never too late. I will do a global replacement. I think a global replacement will do. And then we can review the code before we commit. So now, as promised, the only two occurrences of underscore global are these two. Well, I guess the only occurrence of underscore global is counting tracks. How many tracks do we have? So that's what this is. So let's see. Yeah, that seems about right. Now let's see the changes. Yeah, it is base plus group offset plus value offset. I really wish that there was a more convenient way of writing this, but I cannot think of a way that is at the same time convenient in the sense that it is a bit more readable and at the same time, it is sane and performs well. So I have to think more about this. In fact, I will probably leave a to-do here because I would like to have some sort of abstraction for this thing that I'm doing, because I feel like it's something that there should be an abstraction here. We should be able to put this in the library. It is similar to the memory management that we do already, but this time in the global memory instead of the instance memory. So it feels like it should be doable, but I haven't really gotten to an abstraction that I like. So I'll leave a to do here. Find an abstraction for GMEM data structures. And I feel like I have felt this discomfort before, so probably there is another to-do somewhere. It happens. I often have many to-dos saying the same thing. Every time I have the feeling, I write it down again. Okay, I think that the replacements are okay, so let's go and test this out. I think it will work actually, but we'll see. What do I want to test exactly? First of all, let's test the basics, that the synchronization is still happening. And it is happening. Great. Now let's test the fact that if I am in a different group, the synchronization should not happen. And it does not happen. Awesome. Then let's test the fact that if I have a third instance, perhaps, then I can sync it to different groups. Let's see what that looks like. Yep, I am in group 1, and then when I switch to 2, well, something odd happens. Yes, it is just syncing these two, and that's okay. What is not okay is when I switch groups, it overwrites the group. See? So I make changes and it only syncs with that one. So I'm going to pull all of them down so it's very easy to see. When I switch to group 2, I would want for these sliders to pick up these values, but the opposite occurs. See? So that's what we have to fix next. And that's what I thought was going to happen anyway. Let's see why this is happening in the code. When we change the group, the slider section is going to run. And we are going to write into the global memory our current state. That's not what we would want to have happen. Let's read all these lines in detail, because there are some lines that we don't want to run. So these two lines we don't want to run because they are overriding the global state. We would like to read the global state. This is already, it's also overwriting the global state. This is overwriting the global state. And this look ahead in samples, I think that there is an issue here, but I will have to think about it. Anyway, the plugin delay compensation is also set there. So I guess I just want to skip this whole shebangs. I just want to skip this whole thing. For that, I will need to know if I switched groups, because if I switched groups, I don't want any of this to happen. I don't want any kind of overriding to happen, because then this block section will pick it up and synchronize stuff. That's what's up. So let's go introduce the notion of I changed the group. I will introduce a variable that I will call group previews. And then in the slider section, and then here I will check if the group previous is equal to the group, in other words, if I did not change the group, then run this block of code. Because if I did not change the group, it means that I changed some of the other parameters and I would like the global synchronization to work. It's no longer global, the group aware synchronization to work. That's what I would like to happen. But if the previous group is not the same as the group, then skip the whole group synchronization stuff. Same scenario as before. I have group 1 here, group 2 there. For whatever reason, group 2 is all a bunch of zeros. I don't know what that's about. But anyway, synchronization is happening here. And when I switch to 2, it's all zeros here instead of overriding that one. That's the behavior I want. Yeah, I can now, I guess let's make it as obvious as possible by doing this. So now I can switch to groups 1 and 2 and the parameters go along. Perfect, that's the right behavior. There's just one last thing to deal with. When I switch to another group, it's all a bunch of zeros to begin with. And that's because in the global memory, everything is initialized with a bunch of zeros, not what we want. So let's initialize the global memory and all the chunks in the global memory with the default values. I think that's the right way of going about it. Yeah, I think so. I think we just initialize the global memory with the default values. I was thinking of perhaps other solutions when maybe I would detect that the group has not been initialized yet and then initialize it, but let's not. Let's just initialize all the groups with default values. Or not. It's going to be tricky, I think. I'll have to think about it. Anyway, let's see the changes we made so far. Okay, simple stuff. Now, before I start writing code here, let's think for a moment about how we want to do this. My initial idea is pretty straightforward. Instead of just letting everything be initialized with a bunch of zeros, let's just do a loop and initialize these data structures with the default values. Now, the tricky business is what happens when you close a project with this settings and you reopen it. I would like for the global memory to know of stuff that has happened here. I am not so sure this is going to work, but still, let's just try to do the simple thing. I just allocated this space for the groups. Let's get all the groups starting at 0. Let's loop over groups. And let's go to these places. And really what we want to do is to put these numbers there. But let's have them as constants instead of just having a bunch of magic numbers. What? Why is this changing? Why are these two changing? It makes no sense. Really, what? Did I change some other lines that I don't know about? I created 3 variables and their names are fresh. And then I wrote this to initialize the global memory, and that seems about right. And then just everything broke. Well, this variable isn't fresh, so is this used somewhere where it shouldn't? Oh, of course it is. This is the name of the slider. That's what's about. That's what this is about, yeah. That variable name is not fresh. So I will call this group. I guess I'll call it init.group, where the init is the section I'm in. Whatever, just to avoid the name clashing. So better now. And importantly, when I switch to different groups, they start with the default values. And if I move the sliders and then move to a different group, they are on the default values instead of being a bunch of zeros. Okay, that's what we wanted. Next, I have to think about the situation that will happen when I close and reopen this file. We'll see that next. If this is the first member of the group, set the defaults. The group may have existing values from previous use. Yeah, that's what I am thinking. Well, here's the situation. You could, because of a bug or I don't know, you edited the text file that REAPER stores when you save a project or whatever, you could have different instances of the plugin in the same group with different slider values. And that's, of course, terrible. But I will not worry about this because you can only get into that state if there is another bug to begin with. So I guess in that situation, what I will do is just arbitrary, not an issue. I think it will probably just be, I won't code anything for this to happen, but I think that naturally what will happen is just one of the instances is going to win and reset every other instance from the same group. Oh, and what you're saying here is if the group is the first member of the, if the instance is the first member of the group, set the defaults. That's more or less what I am doing when I am initializing all the global namespaces, all the global slots with the default values, except that I'm not waiting for an instance to get into the group before I do it. which actually means, what does it mean? Which actually means that these lines are no longer necessary. No, rather it means that this check is no longer necessary. That check was there so that the global memory would be initialized somehow, but now it is initialized explicitly here, so that check is no longer necessary. But it's still the case that as soon as you load the plugin for the first time, you want to get these guys. Yeah, I think that that's about right. So let's see if I have one instance here and I move the sliders about. And then when I add a new instance, it will by default be on group 1, so it should pick up these values. And it did. Perfect. But now the next issue is I store the project in a file and I load it back up. The global slots will be initialized here. Then my sliders will be initialized there, and I will have lost the sliders for this instance. Yeah, maybe that's what you're referring to, Mage, and if it is, then I guess you are a bit ahead of me. But let's try to first see if the problem occurs. So I guess what I will do is I will get fresh instances of my Automixer. I will put instance 1 at 100, 1, and 10, or I guess 100, 100, 100. Can they all be 100? Well, this is off range. So I don't know, 5. Nope, that's also out of range. 1.1. That's in range. Then look ahead. 10. Okay. Then this will be in group 2. 200, 1.2, and 20. And just for the sake of it, I will also give them different priorities. But I'm not worried about the priority because there is no synchronization of priorities, so it will just naturally do the thing it does where it stores and restores, and where it stores and then yeah, restores. It gets back the priority from the typical sliders. Anyway, let's save this project. I'll put this in my temporary folder, create directory, and move all media, though there is no media. And I'll call this the Automixer. Now I will close the project. I will reopen the project. And I will look at the sliders. 100, 1.1, and 10. That's right, actually. And then this one, 200, 1.2, 20, and 2. All of that is correct. Which is surprising to me, because it seems to me like the init block didn't run. Because if the init block runs, then these variables will initialize to the defaults, and then these variables will overwrite the sliders with the default values. So what's up with that? Weird. What happens if I just add a new instance of the Automixer? Okay, now it picked up the default values from the global namespace, and it even overrode this instance with the default values, except for the priority, of course, because that's not synchronized. So there you have it. That's the issue I am thinking about. But really, did the init block not run at all? Is this what this is doing? Is the init block not only going to run just once when the plugin loads, but also just once at all? That's so fascinating to me. I want to test this concept because it is new to me. I knew that this variable would have an effect on when you, for instance, hit play, it does not rerun the init section. That I knew. What I didn't know, and it may be wrong, we are going to test this, but it seems like the init block doesn't run again at all, not even when you close and reopen the session. And that's surprising to me. I thought that it was going to run the init block again. Let's give this a try real quick. I think I will have a special plugin just to test this out. So let's go into the test plugin and we'll have this. Or first, we'll not have it. First, we will not have it. So okay, simple enough. Then I will close this project, create a new one, add my test plugin, and inspect that the init section ran. Cool. Or I think I will do a +1 here just so that I can see how many times it runs. So I'll just have a variable called init. So it ran once, and when I hit play, I thought it was gonna run again, and it seems like it didn't. If I bypass and hit play and unbypass and hit play, it's only running the init block once. That is weird. And if I save, it's only running it once. I don't believe it. New project. Is this variable name special in any way? What's up with that? Isn't the init block supposed to run anytime you hit play? Isn't that what that variable was for? Yikes, I am confused. Is this because I am missing some other sections? Just making sure that the sections exist. No, it really is not running the init section anymore. That is very surprising to me. But anyway, at least it ran it once. So if I save this, it ran it once. I will close, reopen, and it ran it once. What the hell is happening here? If it is running it once, how come on the Automixer it is running these lines and then these lines and overriding the sliders, but not overriding the sliders? It's not showing. The sliders are not overwritten. Init is weird. Let's see what you all have to say. If you move all instances away from group 1, then move one of them back to group 1, should the default values be default or what they were previously? I would say what they were previously. It doesn't really matter a whole lot, of course. Either answer is correct, but my gut feeling is that it should be what they were previously, because maybe you fine-tuned the value somehow, then you are just putting all instances into another group and then getting a bunch of instances back into the group. You would like your carefully tuned settings to be there. And if you want to use the defaults, it's very easy to just reset sliders to their defaults by double clicking. So does it run again when you add a second instance? The init section is going to run again on the second instance this time. That is what happens, yes. So yeah, I have no idea why this is happening, but anyway, I think I know what the solution probably is supposed to be. Well, I was thinking of a different solution. I'm thinking of many solutions. Let me talk through some of them. One of them is to use the serialize block to store the positions of the sliders in global memory. So effectively to store everything that we have over here. And then when this runs, it will overwrite. God damn it. This section is going to run, so it will overwrite whatever I restored. Tricky. Another possible solution is over here. When I'm doing this restoring, I could check if the slider is different, but it will be different to begin with. Tricky. Yikes. This problem is super complicated. I'm looking for an answer in the chat, so if you know what to do here, let me know. Seems like it's, you know, when you're programming and then things start to look a bit creepy, like it's happening now. Things are becoming a bit creepy. I think it's the right time to stop and then let the problem simmer in the back of your head, because it will make more sense the next day. This whole init section is weird situation. Bit of a red flag. And this problem is also a red flag. So I will think about what I want to do. One possible solution would be to check if the sliders are not zero and are not the default, but checking that they're zero is kind of a hack, because currently the sliders don't have zero as a possible value. It's out of range. Oh, in this it is in range, so it's not even an option. And another solution would be to just store this whole block of memory in the slider section, but then the init block is going to overwrite it, I think. Not in the slider section, in the serialize section. So the whole state of the groups would be stored along with the file. That's what the serialize block does. Possible solutions, all right, yeah, but I think that we accomplished the goal of today's session, at least if you have a bunch of instances, group 1, group 2, group 3, or I guess group 1, group 2, and then the associated sliders here move about correctly. And that's what we set out to do, and it is working. So that much is okay, but we have a big red flag here. If you close and reopen the project, then things may or may not work. So I'll leave myself a to-do that is group sliders when you close and reopen project. And we can all think about what to do and then next time implement a solution. You are okay if the deserialize runs after init. You are right, but I don't think it does. I think deserialize runs before init. Let's see. And even if it runs like you were saying, the deserialization could run after initialization, but in that case, this would not happen. Oh, but that's okay because these ladders would have been stored anyway. So it's not the end of the world. Yeah. Oh, and if I don't have these lines, they are going to occur anyway because of this. I think that these lines are unnecessary. Okay, I will test this and then I will wrap it up. So those lines existed so that I would have one instance with particular values. And then when I have another instance, it needs to sync those values. Oh, it reset the values. The lines are necessary. The lines are necessary. I thought that the block section was just going to pick them up. Oh, hang on. No, what I'm doing is completely absurd. This is not something that I want to do every time. I just want to do this if the track is track 0. Because I don't want every new instance to reinitialize the global or the group parameters. Okay, so with this setup, do I still need these lines? I don't think I do. No, I still need the lines. Still need the lines. With the lines there, will it work? Well, that's kind of unfair. Let's add a fresh new instance. Yes. So with the lines there, it works. Okay. Now it's simply a matter of finding the order in which the sections run, because in theory, I could just maybe in the serialize block have a variable that says like, I have been unserialized just now. And if that variable is set, then I don't run this block. Let's go to the JSFX documentation real quick and find out the order in which these things run. Cool. Sometimes init will be called following serialize. This to me indicates that sometimes it will not. Does it mean that sometimes it will be called before? Or does it mean that sometimes init will not be called at all? I don't know. For me, this text is ambiguous. We will need to actually test this out, but I will not today. I think we have done enough shenanigans for one day. So with that, well, I noticed that you were gone because I asked about your weekend and you didn't answer. So yeah, I noticed. And you are okay if this serialize runs after init? Not even, right? Not even that, because then these would have been reset, and then these would be wrong. So I don't know. It is a very weird situation that we are in. There is probably a principled solution for this. We'll find it. It usually comes to me about 5 hours after the stream is over. So, you don't want serialize and deserialize to run for every instance, just once on save and once on load. This is complex stuff. It could run for every instance. If I am just storing the global stuff, it's the same for every instance, so that's okay. We have a massive heat wave, so not done much except troubleshooting iPlug. Well, for people who want to follow along with the troubleshooting of iPlug, go to the link in the description where you will find first my website, and from there the Discord group where Bo is talking about his iPlug progress, and progress has been made. So interesting stuff, and more about this on the meeting of the C++ study group, which I think on this week will be on Wednesday. We'll see. It may be tomorrow. So yeah, that's about it for today. Next time, which I think will be tomorrow, we will probably do something different, because this whole situation here probably requires a bit more time for me to figure out. But what we can work on tomorrow is something super cool that has to do with the video portion of Automixer. So you are able to put multiple cameras in different people, and the camera angle will switch to the person who is speaking, which is something that you can do with the old version of the Automixer that I'm reworking. And on that old version, you could only do it for post-production, so you would load all the tracks in REAPER. For this version, I'm thinking of adding a feature that allows you to do that even live. So you would have multiple cameras, multiple microphones, and it would be switching to the person who is speaking automatically using OBS. I think it would be super fun. So we may work on that tomorrow. For the time being, thank you, Bo, Erkan, and Mage, for joining me on the chat. Thank you to everyone else who is watching this. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, support me on PayPal and Patreon. It's great because you haven't looked into JSFX before. If you're familiar with C or the C heritage, like JavaScript and Java, it's not that difficult to read, but there are interesting concepts that have to do with real-time audio processing. Anyway, thank you all for being here. I see you tomorrow. Have a good one. Bye. No, the keyboard shortcut didn't work. See you tomorrow. Bye. Thank you for watching the stream. You know how great it has been. Or maybe it sucked, and I am glad that you stuck with me. And soon we'll all be back together for some more coding or talking or chilling. The next time I'll be streaming.